The night my CEO told me to stand up and thank Sienna Cole for saving my project, I smiled. I even nodded. I let the applause happen. What nobody in that glass-walled boardroom understood was this: the presentation carried her name, but the system keeping the SEC away from our front door was mine. And buried on page 21 of a contract they had forgotten about was the clause that made me untouchable. They thought I was the obedient compliance nerd. They mistook quiet for weak. They forgot I built the machine. My name is Olivia Grant. I'm 38 years old, and for 11 years I was the senior risk architect at Blackridge Ledger Group, a Manhattan fintech firm that liked to call itself a disruptive. My job was not glamorous. I didn't ring bells on trading floors or charm investors over steak dinners. I lived in the basement of the building, metaphorically speaking. I built frameworks. I read regulatory enforcement actions for fun. I designed systems that detected insider trading patterns before regulators even drafted subpoenas. I was structural integrity. And structural integrity only gets noticed when it fails. The quarterly strategy meeting took place in what they called the Atlas Room, all glass, steel, and a view of downtown Manhattan that made interns feel important. Our CEO, Daniel Mercer, stood at the front. Perfect silver hair. Tailored suit. The kind of voice that could cut your department budget and make you thank him for it. Today, he announced, we unveil the future of Blackridge. He clicked the remote. The screen lit up. Sentinel Grid. My stomach tightened. Sentinel Grid was my system. 3 years of design, coding, calibration. A self-learning compliance architecture that monitored every transaction in real time, flagged layering, wash trading, suspicious options activity. It was the firewall between us and catastrophic SEC fines. Daniel smiled. This breakthrough is the result of visionary leadership from our Chief Strategy Officer, Sienna Cole. Sienna rose from her seat in a sharp crimson dress that probably cost more than my mortgage. She accepted Daniel's guiding hand at her back like it belonged there. Their relationship wasn't official, but in our office nothing that obvious stayed secret. I sat at the far end of the table, where technical staff were expected to observe and stay quiet. Sienna began speaking. Smooth. Polished. Words like synergy and proactive oversight floated across the room. On the screen were my flowcharts. My architecture diagrams. My predictive models. Except in the bottom right corner, where my internal watermark used to sit, there was a sleek logo, the Cole Initiative. I felt heat rise up my neck. I had presented these modules to Daniel and Sienna privately for 6 months. They knew exactly who built them. Leonard Hayes, a board member who actually read documents, raised his hand. Ms. Cole, he said, dry and precise, can you explain how Sentinel Grid handles heuristic detection across fragmented dark pool activity, and what the false positive rate is under $10,000 thresholds? Silence. Sienna's smile froze. She clicked backward. Her eyes skimmed the slide. She didn't know. Her gaze flicked across the table and landed on me. A brief plea. Daniel cut in before I could speak. Leonard, he said smoothly, let's not get lost in technical weeds. Olivia, he added, glancing at me like a warning, no need to complicate the discussion. The message was clear. Stay in your lane. A few nervous laughs floated around the table. I lowered my gaze. I nodded. I let it happen. That was the moment they believed they had one. After the meeting, Sienna intercepted me in the hallway. You should learn to be a team player, Olivia, she said, adjusting her cufflink without looking at me. At this level, nobody remembers who writes code. They remember who stands on stage. It was clean. Surgical. I went straight to Daniel's office. I didn't wait for his assistant to announce me. Sentinel Grid is built on my original consultancy architecture, I said. The intellectual property was never formally transferred. He poured himself a midday scotch. Legal handled that years ago, he replied. Did they? I asked. Because Clause 21 in my consultant agreement says the core framework remains mine unless a separate IP transfer addendum is executed. It never was. His expression hardened. Blackridge invested millions in you, Olivia. Don't make yourself an HR issue. HR issue. Corporate code for disposable. I left without another word. That night, I pulled the original contract from a filing cabinet in my apartment. Rivera and Grant Risk Solutions LLC. My old company. Clause 21 was still there. Clear. Unambiguous. Unless a specific addendum is signed, proprietary frameworks remain property of the consultant. I searched 11 years of archived email. I found the onboarding thread. The standard employment agreement covers work going forward, legal had written. No attachment. No addendum. They had assumed compliance meant obedience. They had never checked the fine print. I logged into Sentinel Grid's backend from my secure VPN. Not the polished dashboard Sienna showed the board. The real core. The immutable audit logs. That's when I saw it. A new administrative account created 8 weeks ago, s.cole.strategy. The chief strategy officer had no reason to have backend access. I tracked activity timestamps. 1:12 a.m., 2:47 a.m., 3:05 a.m. She wasn't adding data. She was modifying thresholds. She lowered wash trade sensitivity. Reduced layering detection windows. Increased insider trade minimum triggers. She was blinding the system. I cross-referenced those dates with revenue spikes from a new VIP client fund, Horizon Crest Capital. I ran their trades through original parameters. The screen lit up red. Perfectly timed options. Coordinated volume bursts. Patterns so obvious they practically screamed manipulation. Every alert had been manually overridden by Sienna's account. Categorized as a system noise. She wasn't stealing credit. She was using my system to hide illegal trading for her star clients. And Daniel had praised her for strategic growth. This wasn't vanity. This was fraud. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. The humiliation from the boardroom burned away. This was bigger. This was my name attached to a compliance system being weaponized to shield crime. They thought I was a pawn. They forgot I owned the board. The next morning, I walked into Daniel's office at 8:15 a.m. sharp. I placed a white envelope on his desk. I resign, I said. Effective immediately. He scoffed. You're overreacting. No, I replied. I'm being precise. He signed the termination paperwork faster than I expected. Security escorted me out before 9. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Sienna smiling near the coffee station. She thought I had lost. She didn't realize she had just activated the clause. At 9:30 a.m., HR processed my termination. My employee ID was flagged inactive. At 10 a.m., Sentinel Grid performed its hourly license authentication. The core license was tied to my active employment status under the original consultancy framework. The handshake failed. Authentication revoked. Ownership reverted to Grant Risk Solutions LLC. Enterprise access shifted to read-only mode. They didn't notice at first. Dashboards still displayed cached data. But at 4:01 p.m., when the system ran end-of-day compliance batch reporting, everything froze. No write access. No fresh logs. No regulatory output. Billions in trades unmonitored. My phone lit up with Daniel Mercer's name. I let it ring. By 4:15 p.m., Blackridge was in panic mode. The compliance team couldn't generate a single end-of-day regulatory report. The trading floor was running blind. Without Sentinel Grid actively logging and verifying transactions, they were exposed. Not hypothetically. Legally. Daniel called 12 times that night. I didn't answer. Instead, I called my attorney. The same attorney who drafted Clause 21 11 years earlier. When he reviewed the contract and confirmed what I already knew, his only response was, they built a billion-dollar operation on borrowed property. By the next morning, Blackridge's board understood the situation. They had two choices. Sue me and risk exposing the internal threshold modifications in open court, or negotiate. They negotiated. A 4-month emergency consulting agreement. Triple my previous annual salary paid up front. Full administrative authority over Sentinel Grid. Complete indemnification from any past system misuse. They signed within 48 hours. On Monday morning, I walked back into Blackridge, not as an employee, but as external compliance architect and sole license holder. The silence on the trading floor was almost theatrical. Daniel looked exhausted. Sienna looked composed, but her jaw was tight. Let's fix this quickly, Daniel said. We're bleeding. We don't fix anything quickly, I replied. We audit. I requested 90 days of full, unredacted server logs. No one argued. They couldn't. What I didn't tell them was that I had already mirrored the critical data. What I was doing now wasn't restoration. It was evidence collection. I cross-referenced Sienna's manual overrides with Horizon Crest's transaction spikes. Then I pulled archived internal emails. The timestamps lined up perfectly. Handled. Cleared. Noise reduced. She wasn't just adjusting alerts. She was coordinating suppression around specific trades. Then I found something worse. Horizon Crest Capital wasn't just a client. Payments were flowing from Horizon into a Delaware shell entity called Meridian Advisory Group. I traced ownership filings. Managing partner, Eric Cole. Sienna's cousin. My stomach went cold. This wasn't internal politics. This was a kickback structure. Clients paid Meridian. Meridian paid family. In exchange, compliance alerts disappeared. That night, I received an anonymous encrypted email. Attached was a scanned SEC subpoena issued to Blackridge 2 weeks before I resigned. They already knew. The company had been trying to control the narrative before responding. They weren't just hiding fraud. They were preparing falsified logs. That was the moment I made the decision. I contacted a securities whistleblower attorney. I provided legally obtained audit logs, the contract, and documentation of override patterns. We filed formal submission under the SEC whistleblower program. I remained inside Blackridge as consultant, but now I was cooperating with regulators. A few days later, Sienna invited me to meet at an upscale hotel bar to clear the air. I went. I recorded. All I did was adjust warning thresholds, she said smoothly over a martini. The system was too sensitive. I was protecting client relationships. She offered me a permanent executive role. A pay raise. A future. Just clean up the logs, she added quietly. Make the noise disappear. It was the admission I needed. 48 hours later, the SEC arrived. Not with a press release. With agents. A legal hold email froze the entire company's data systems. The Atlas room turned into a federal briefing center. Daniel looked pale. Sienna looked furious. Agent Singh asked me to explain Sentinel Grid's override structure. I projected the logs. Timestamps. User credentials. Threshold changes. I showed the correlation between override activity and Horizon Crest trades. These are test logs, Sienna interrupted. Agent Singh didn't look at her. Ms. Grant is the architect, she said. Let her speak. Then the agents played the recording from the hotel bar. Sienna's own voice admitting she touched the thresholds to close annoying alerts. Daniel stared at the table. Sienna stared at me. For the first time, she understood. She hadn't lost because of the system. She lost because she underestimated the person who built it. The board convened an emergency meeting that same afternoon. I sat at the table as independent expert and IP owner. Daniel and Sienna sat separately with personal counsel. The SEC laid out two paths: cooperation and reform, or institutional fraud charges. Daniel chose cooperation. Publicly. He stated Sienna acted outside her authority. Sienna's face broke. She realized he was saving himself. Not her. The final blow came during settlement negotiations. My attorney presented the Meridian Advisory financial records. Direct payments from Horizon Crest to Sienna's cousin within hours of override timestamps. The pattern was undeniable. Fraud. Conspiracy. Obstruction. The SEC offered her one option: permanent industry bar and civil penalty in exchange for cooperation, or referral to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. She signed. The press release hit at 3:47 p.m., Sienna Cole permanently barred from securities industry for fraudulent conduct. Daniel resigned quietly a week later. Pursuing other opportunities. The board dissolved the strategy division. Sentinel Grid was placed under new oversight. Leonard Hayes, now interim CEO, offered me a permanent executive position. Chief Risk and Integrity Officer. Full autonomy. Full power. Astronomical compensation. I considered it. For exactly 10 seconds. No, I said. I don't want to spend my life protecting companies from their own leadership. I walked out of Blackridge Ledger Group for the final time on a cold Manhattan afternoon. My phone buzzed with messages from hedge funds, venture firms, startups. We hear you're available. Interested in leading compliance? I didn't respond. I had just proven something more valuable than any title. They thought power was getting regulators to look away. Real power is knowing when to make regulators look closer. If you've ever been underestimated at work, if you've ever had someone take credit for what you built, let this be your reminder. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who owns the system. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you would have done the same. If you enjoyed this story, hit like so more people can see it, and subscribe to the channel for more boss revenge stories every week. I'll see you in the next one.